Hey, konnichiwa, it's Owen Sensei again. And today we're talking about one of my favorite words that represents Japanese culture, the word gaman. Now, if you look up the word gaman in the dictionary, it's going to be patient and to endure. But it has a much more deeper meaning than that. It means to endure without complaint. So the Japanese pride themselves on this concept, their ability to really endure pain without complaining. They feel that they can do this better than anyone in the whole world. And many times in history, the Japanese have argued that they're the stronger society than other societies. And the main point is their ability to do this concept of gaman, which really doesn't exist in the West. So when I was in high school and I first came to Japan, my host father would tell me like every day, I needed to have gaman. You needed to have, I needed to have gaman. Have gaman. And I was like, enough with this gaman. I'd look it up in the dictionary. It said, be patient, be patient, be patient, or endure. And I just didn't understand what he was talking about. And the only thing I could think of was learning Japanese. So I was like, all right, I'll be patient. Someday I'll figure this out. It's very hard, but hopefully if I study hard enough, I'll figure it all out. But what he was really saying is that I needed to accept and stop resisting the way of Japan. And once I really started to figure that out, it started my learning process of this concept of gaman. And even throughout that year, as an exchange student, the rules that my school had, my host family had, it was very challenging. I had to just learn to accept them. I even had a curfew of 6 p.m. I had to come home every day at 6 p.m. And I never understood why, but I didn't complain and I accepted it. And honestly, in the future, I did start to understand at least some of these rules and what the purpose and meaning behind them, especially the 6 o'clock curfew one. After years of hanging out, late in Tokyo all night, I kind of look back and say that was probably pretty smart that my host father had me come home at 6 p.m. when I was 16 and in Japan for the first time. But putting that aside, learning that this concept of gaman really has created, my foundation for success in Japan today. So years later after high school, I came back to Japan and I trained in karate at something called the uchideshi, which means live-in student. And it really took this concept of gaman to a new level. It was the ultimate level, I would say, in Japan, where I had every day I was scolded and being taught, a way of, not just karate training, but just a way of life of a karate student, or this concept of Bushido. And I needed to accept, and even though I didn't understand, I couldn't ask why. I needed to just endure and accept and believe that in the future I would understand not just my karate technique, but the reasons why we, live this lifestyle at that time. So this concept really became the foundation and success, this process of learning gaman for understanding and succeeding in the Japanese society today. So, with an interesting word exists that represents gaman. At least in martial arts, we have this word called os, and it's pronounced that way, with the kind of a strong, short accent. It's a os, and when your sensei would give you direction, that's how you responded. In Japanese, you would say hai, which means yes, but you would never use that word in a karate school. You always say os. Now, again, I first understood that word to mean yes. I didn't understand that it had this concept of gaman within it, meaning that whatever you were being told by your teacher, you were accepting, not resisting, and believing that you would understand it in the future. And you would eventually achieve your goal, whatever that goal might be. Now, the reason I want to mention this is because in society today, they've kind of changed the meaning of this word os. And it sounds more like osu, osu, and it's often used by men or athletes, when they greet each other, especially in the morning. It's kind of a way of saying good morning. They go osu, and I just want to understand that even though it's the same word, it's lost that meaning of gaman by transitioning into this kind of casual greeting. So when you come to Japan or study Japanese and you'll come across this word, just understand that even though it's the same word, it has two different meanings depending on, the environment or the context that it's being used in. Now, this concept of gaman it's a two-edged sword where, yes, it's a great idea. You're building strength, your ability to endure, but it can be taken too far. So this concept of gaman also leads to stress and in some cases depression. And I often argue that, one of the reasons that Japan has such a high suicide rate is because of this concept of gaman, that people take it too much. They don't allow themselves to release that stress somehow or to express their emotion or opinion or ask the questions why. So my advice about the concept of gaman is that Japan needs to create a more modern form of gaman or a more moderate, form of gaman in order to not lose their culture and their strength in a way of the Japanese kind of spirit or the samurai spirit that exists among all Japanese people, but it needs to be adjusted and changed for modern day society. So that's my discussion on the concept of gaman. But if you come to Japan, I guarantee you will see it and experience it in some form. So if you're interested in learning more about the concept of gaman or other interesting words in Japanese, please check out my book, Chipping Away, by clicking below this video at one of the sites that sells my ebook. Thank you very much.